We have with us Marc Thiessen, visiting fellow at the Hoover Institution. He served as senior positions in George W. Bush's administration, notably as chief speechwriter for President Bush. He's at work on a book now on the CIA interrogation program that will be published by Regnery in 2010. Marc, thanks for being with us again.
Thanks for having me on.
Appreciate it.
Pleasure.
First of all, when's your book coming out?
Early 2010. I've got to finish writing it, and then because I'm a former administration official, I had to let the Obama administration review it to see if they want to redact it in any way. So it'll be very interesting to see. I have to give it to the Obama White House for a security review. So we'll see what they try and take out.
Tell people a little bit more about that. Isn't that absolutely absurd? As long as you don't have anything in there favorable with regard to George Bush, I'm sure it'll be fine. But it really is true for security reasons, isn't it?
It is for security reasons. I mean, I was read into a highly classified program, and a lot of the information about this program is classified. But as you see from the documents that were released in the last few days, there's sections that are blacked out, and so I'm doing my best to make sure we don't give anything away. But they're going to review it, and it'll probably be the CIA.
Marc,
actually, that does the review.
How could you possibly give anything away in light of all of the stuff that they're putting out over there?
It's shocking. Well, I'll tell you, they have written. Barack Obama has written a chapter of the Al-Qaeda training manual with all these releases. He has given the terrorists the secret to how to defeat any interrogation techniques, and it is just extremely damaging for our country. I think when the history of this period is written, it will show that Barack Obama gave the terrorists. It's the equivalent of if Churchill had canceled the Ultra program and given the Germans the secret to how we broke their codes. That's how significant this is historically.
Is it because of your feeling in that regard that you decided to write on this subject? You did a lot of things in the White House, and you were speechwriter and so forth, among other things. Sure. And is that the reason you chose this particular topic? It doesn't necessarily go with some of the other things you did?
Well, I'll tell you why. I wrote President Bush's speech in September 2006 revealing the CIA program, and I spent months. That speech was written
What program?
Sorry.
What program?
The CIA interrogation program.
Okay.
How we detained and interrogated these captured terrorists when he released the details of this.
Right.
And during the course of that, I spent a lot of hours interviewing and getting to know the actual interrogators of people who did these things and stopped the next attack. And these people became my friends and people I respected a lot. And every day I look on the news and I see them being referred to as torturers and people who betrayed American values and all these sort of epithets being thrown at them.
Jim Jones says they apparently is saying that they violated the law. They're criminals.
Yeah, they're criminals, torturers, and people who betrayed our values. And you know what they are to me? They're heroes. They're people that I have enormous respect for.
What's a profile? Give me a general profile of the kind of people that you're talking about, that you work with.
These are they're the interrogators are people who are highly trained interrogators, spend a lot of time studying how to use the techniques and to apply them safely. The people who debrief the terrorists are trained CIA analysts who are experts on Al-Qaeda, experts on the individuals that they're who've been following the individuals they're questioning for years. And these people are highly trained, professional people who took on a very, very unpleasant task in order to keep this country safe. And I'll tell you something, if it had not been for what they did, we would have had another attack on the scale of 9/11 in the past 8 years. So they are.
What makes
they shouldn't
you
be getting subpoenas? They should get here. They should get medals.
What in the first place, their training doesn't have all to do with enhanced interrogation techniques, does it?
Well, it does. They're trained specifically in those, and those were very careful. If you read those memos, they were very carefully applied,
right.
And very limited.
But what I'm saying is that's not all they did. Only 30 people were subjected to the enhanced interrogation techniques. Only 3 were waterboarded.
That's right.
But
those are the people I'm talking about. The people who did this limited program. You got to think about it. You got it exactly right, though, Fred. Because I think if I'm working on this book, and my wife told me the other day. She said, "I bet you if you ask the American people how many were people waterboarded in Guantanamo Bay, about 90% would say yes."
Yeah.
No one was waterboarded in Guantanamo
Bay.
Only a couple of people had any enhanced techniques used on them in Guantanamo Bay. There were, I think, something like 60,000 interrogations have been done in Guantanamo Bay, and only 2 people had any enhanced techniques on them at all. Tens of thousands.
Anybody who took the time to read those documents that are coming out will be amazed at the care that was taken.
Exactly right.
Not only the people administering this program, but the lawyers who were telling them what was legal, how far they could go, how many ounces of water they could use, and so forth.
Mark, my concern is that's precisely where the left is going to go with this. I watched Jerry Nadler this morning from New York, Congressman, talk about that. Yeah, precisely the fact that this stuff was so carefully controlled and how they're going to go after those higher in the food chain, so to speak, than the field operatives. What do you think about that?
I think that this program was legal, moral, and necessary. And everyone from the people who authorized it, starting with the President of the United States who authorized this program, down to the people who interrogated these terrorists, are heroes who stopped the next 9/11. The one thing that has been done by the release of these documents, a lot of damage has been done to the national security by the release of all this information, but largely thanks to Dick Cheney pushing for the release of the facts about the effectiveness of this program. That's been put to rest now. These documents prove that these terrorists gave us actionable intelligence only after enhanced techniques were used on them, and they would have not, the information we would not have had, plots we would not have known about, terrorists who would still be at large and probably have carried out their attacks by now if it hadn't been for these techniques. That these people saved lives, and that's a game changer in the debate.
You know what the left is saying now. They're having to respond to this and answer questions as to their logic. They didn't answer, they didn't answer, they didn't answer, and then these techniques were employed. And Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, for example, decided, well, he'd answer, and evidently became a professor with a chalkboard and the whole thing, because their view was that they're obligated to put resistance to a certain point, and then they're not anymore, and they fulfill their moral obligation. But now the left is saying, well, Mohammed is now saying that he told the Red Cross that he really lied when he gave them that information. But then the gullible media doesn't pick up on this at all. They know after a while when he's lying and when he's not because of other information they have, do they not? He's just saying this now.
That's exactly right. And what they did was they didn't just take their word for it. I mean, if the media were to believe the CIA is a bunch of idiots who just, listened to these terrorists, what they said, and ran down chasing a rabbit down a hole. The reality is they checked it against other intelligence. They used information from one detainee to question another detainee so they could catch him in lies. And they had ways of corroborating this information. I mean, things they would do, for example, is they would get a intercept, or the NSA would get an intercept of a phone call. They didn't know who the voice was in the phone call, so they would go to Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and play him the recording, and he would tell them who the voice was. And then they could check that against other information and find out, yes, it was, no, it wasn't that person. Or for example, the West Coast plot, which is the most significant plot that was stopped by these interrogations. KSM told us, for example, that another terrorist in our custody, he had ordered him to send $50,000 to a Southeast Asian terrorist. We went from KSM cell. They went from KSM cells to this other guy's cell and said, KSM told us about the $50,000. And he says, oh, he told you about that? Well, I gave it to this guy Zubair. And he gives us the name and contact information for Zubair. We then go and we capture Zubair. We question Zubair, and he gives us the information about what he did with the money and so on and so forth, and catches a bunch of terrorists.
Mark, you're doing a public service by writing this book and by talking about what you know. We need people who were there, who knew how this thing was being carried out and how it operated, and not these politicians on the Hill who are trying to do this injustice to them. Thank you so much for what you're doing and for being with us.